Hi, I'm going to do a reading here, and just wanted to have my face on there so you can put a face to the words. Here we go. This is Soulmates, Soul Cells, and Sexism. This is about soulmates, soul cells, and sexism. This is the first thing I've written with the idea of reading it into a vlog or sermon to be delivered online. I've never written a sermon before, but I call it that because my mom and dad, brother and sister-in-law all write sermons, so I've been around sermon writing most of the first half of my life so far. When I was a kid in middle school, some other kids said I talk like a book. I might as well make the most of this quality. What is a soulmate? What is a soul cell? And what does sexism have to do with it? It is linguistically convenient in a sexist patriarchal culture to talk about men and women in a relationship, and I'm going to do this, and at times address the sexist implications. Even today, transgender rights are some sort of flashpoint in our culture. People who are otherwise labeled as feminists have their own issues with trans rights. J.K. Rowling has been most famous for dragging the culture through the debate by a misuse of her mind and all Gen X's money she took. I wrote a better book than Harry Potter, so I can talk smack all I want. I was against J.K. 30 years before it was hip. I should say someone wrote a better book than J.K. I'm not just kidding. I had two reasons for disliking J.K. 30 years ago. One was I thought the books sucked, and I resented that they were famous books that made the fantasy genre publicly acceptable when much better books were ignored. Even though I hadn't read them, I knew the basics from the movie and video game. But even before this, before I knew anything about Harry Potter, I always hated J.K. Would you believe me if I told you it was because I knew she was transphobic before I read a, well, to sell all or part of your annuity payments for the cash you need now, whether you need to make an important purchase, before I read a word inside the book, and just by the name J.K., well, I did not know she was transphobic. I had not honed in that far, but I knew from the cover she was sexist. Before any jackass starts thinking I mean sexist against men, I'm probably more anti-patriarchy than anyone you know or have heard of. I'm the one who coined the phrase masculinity is a dangerous myth. So if you think like that, stop. Stop reading this, stop listening, or more importantly, stop thinking like that, and continue listening and reading, if you were man enough to handle some words. I knew J.K. was sexist against women before anyone knew she was transphobic. And transphobia is a component of sexism. Homophobia is a component of sexism too. Since I was probably 14, I maintained that homophobia was, you believed I went to the moon, but you don't believe I went to Japan? Samantha said on Bewitched just now on my TV. She went to Japan to shop with her mom since the stores are closed on Sundays. I've always known homophobia was a subset of sexism. It seems natural that transphobia would be understood as a subset of sexism too. But J.K. considers herself a feminist or even a woman, and fails to recognize transphobia as an example of fascism dividing its opposition, creating differences between us. This requires us all to be as intersectional as possible. Feminist card revoked if you aren't using your billions in voice to say Black Lives Matter and Trans Lives Matter too. And the planet, if you have billions to help save the planet, help save the planet. Greta is far more feminist on less cash than JK. I'm going to move on for those who already get it, so this isn't like some review since it will come up back up later. But how do I know JK was sexist? Because JK and HP were famous. Maybe others don't remember this, but it was a while after her first book came out that the identity of JK was revealed, because she could have been a man from the initials JK. As soon as I knew about these books, as soon as they were famous, I was upset at JK for perpetuating the sexist idea that only men can write, or people will only read fantasy written by men. This may be true of our patriarchal society, but it was already changing and even more critical at points of change when could be a lady in the moon, not a man, Samantha just said. You don't want to know everything about me, do you? There are some things a wife should not tell her husband, and whether or not she has been to the moon is one of them. Sexism, as entrenched as it has been changing in the literary world for a few hundred years, and was at a pivotal moment in the late 20th century when Harry Potter came out. Of course, she did not know how